What's up, guys? Nuance Bro checking in, and today we're going to be talking about Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, also known as AOC for short. And she did an Instagram live video recently about her experience during the Capitol riots, which if you don't remember the Capitol riots, just hit my mic, the Capitol riots on January 6th, something which we covered here on the channel, which you haven't seen the video already, be sure to watch that. But she talks about her experience, and let's just say there's a little bit of exaggeration, shall we say. So without further ado, let's get to the video.
And so I park my car, and I park right in front of the Capitol, but actually there's like a fence right behind. It's kind of like if you're in New York City, sorry, I mean, I'm sure other cities do this too, but I'm just speaking to my experience. Like, you know when you guys go to a parade and there's just like that aluminum fencing to keep the, like to mark off the parade route, and it's just like waist high, just like aluminum fence, and sometimes the police like pull it aside to let people cross the street. There was just one of those in the perimeter around the Capitol. And there are all these people with like these huge like flag poles with the spear tips and whatnot. I remember seeing all of this and being like, this is weird. That's suspicious. Because if you so much as say Black Lives Matter around the Capitol Hill complex, it's like 9 barricades go up. I mean, if you see the protests and the amount of militarization from last year's protests, it was like boom, 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 boom. National Guard comes in, like all these militarized people are around.
All right, so this Instagram live video is about an hour and a half long. So we're about 18 minutes into the video. If you want to see the entire thing, I'll leave it in the description box below. But she starts out talking about how on Monday, the riot happened on Wednesday, but on Monday, there were still some of these people in town. They were coming in, and they had this thin aluminum fencing, and people were coming up to observe members of Congress. And she was shocked because they had these, flags with the spear tips on them, which, I saw maybe 1 or 2 of those. The Chewbacca guy, most notably, had one of those flags with the spear tips on it, as she calls it. And she is saying that for these guys, they only had the one aluminum barrier, the one piece of fencing. But when it came to just saying Black Lives Matter, if you so much as say Black Lives Matter, they have tons of rows of fencing. It's National Guard, boom, 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 as she says, implying that Black Lives Matter is this fringe, scary phenomena for, the people in D.C. They have a street named after Black Lives Matter in Washington, D.C. They have Black Lives Matter sanctioned by the city, painted in giant letters on the asphalt, because they support Black Lives Matter so much. The destruction during the Black Lives Matter riots in DC and many other cities across the nation was magnitudes more than anything that happened during the January 6th riots that came a few days after this. So there was no precedent that the police could really operate on for right-wing or conservative groups causing as much damage as the Black Lives Matter rioters.
And there is a grocery store on my block. And I remember going to the grocery store that night and seeing all these people in like these MAGA hats, and it felt like tents in the grocery store. And I guess this is just like, whether you're from the Bronx or New York City or Queens or Brooklyn, wherever, whether you're from Chicago, whether you're just, I don't know, you also just have your wits about you in a rural area, you just can catch a vibe and you can kind of know a general sense of when things aren't right. And things started to feel not right when I was in that grocery store that Monday night.
So this is where in the video you can start to see where her judgment gets a little questionable, and you're going to see her judgment get increasingly more questionable as this video goes on. But she talks about a grocery store that's on her block. This is not the first time this is not the only time she's going to be mentioning this grocery store. And she mentions seeing people in MAGA hats, and she's like, you can just tell because there's like a vibe. There's a vibe and you can tell things are off. Yeah, I wonder if it's just because things are off because you live in Washington, D.C., which is an area that's over 90% Democrat, and you've probably maybe never ever seen someone wearing a MAGA hat in your life in your area, because almost everybody in Washington, D.C. votes overwhelmingly Democrat. It's one of the cities that votes the most Democrat in the entire nation.
And then I realized on Tuesday, I was like, oh shoot, I left my keys. I left my keys to the apartment. And so I head back and I head back to go pick up my keys. And the important thing to realize is that, you know, the majority of people in the House and in Congress, they're all congregating around the time of the vote. But if you're going when there isn't a vote, active vote going on, like in the actual Capitol complex where that big dome is, it's pretty empty. And so I go in, I get my keys, and there were people watching. Like I had parked there, and there were already people watching me walk into the Capitol, to the point where it just like didn't feel safe. And so on Tuesday, I started taking my pin off. You know, we have these congressional pins that identify members on the Capitol complex for security reasons. And ironically, by Tuesday, I was already taking my pin off by the time I left the building, so that if someone was looking from far away, they might think I was just, you know, another 5'4", 5'5" girl walking around that might be an intern. And so I was already taking my pin off and making proactive measures because I already felt unsafe on Tuesday.
Okay, so this is hilarious. So she's saying she's far enough away where I guess they wouldn't recognize her. So she's far away from the people who are there to witness members of Congress, I guess, going in and out of the Capitol building. But you're telling me that by removing this small pin that members of Congress typically have on their lapel, that by removing that, all of a sudden they won't recognize her from far away. She's so far away that they wouldn't be able to recognize her silhouette, her face, anything like that. But if they see that pin, they'll know it's her or a member of Congress. I mean, these are tiny pins. So how far away is she to the point where they won't be able to recognize her face, one of the most notoriously known members of Congress, especially to the right wing, because she's villainized and demonized constantly on right-wing media. They're not going to recognize her, but they'll recognize that pin, and therefore, oh, she's a member of Congress? Are you serious?
I head back to the grocery store, and I go in to buy a bottle of matcha tea because I needed the parking validation. And I go in to buy a bottle of tea, and the tension in the grocery store with these people already started escalating to the point where it literally felt like people were looking at me in the grocery store, deciding what they were going to do. Like, are we going to do something right now? Like they were I could see the calculations going on behind their eyes. And it was 100% like when you're in a bodega at 1 o'clock in the morning and you don't know if someone's about to get jumped. It felt like that in a bougie grocery store. Like, it was crazy. I mean, what? Anyways, so starting like around noon that day when I was in the grocery store, I had already come to the conclusion that it was not safe for me to be outside.
Okay, did you guys catch that? So once again, she goes to, I guess, the same grocery store, and she talks about, once again, how the vibes were like people were looking at her, and she's just assuming, because I guess she's a mind reader, that people were deciding. These probably 55-year-old plus MAGA boomers were about to jump her in the middle of a grocery store. Maybe she didn't even know if they were MAGA supporters. I guess she saw maybe like 1 or 2 MAGA hats the day before. She didn't mention the MAGA hats this time, but she's assuming that she might get jumped. And she decided that now it's unsafe for her to be outside because she's paranoid. Now, if this was just like a one-off instance of her making these types of assumptions, okay, whatever. You could just write it off. But as you're going to see as we continue playing this video, it gets crazier. Okay, so just keep that in mind.
And I go back to scrolling through lunch options for what we're going to order when all of a sudden I hear boom, 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 boom on my door. And then I hear these huge, violent bangs on my door, and then every door going into my office. Just bang, bang. Oh, shoot, see, look, I'm banging over again. Bang, 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 bang.
So before she clumsily knocked her phone over, which was pretty funny, keep in mind we skipped about 20 minutes ahead in the video here. Now we're on Wednesday, the day of the actual riot at the Capitol. This is, I guess, shortly before that happens. And she's talking about how she's happy that Warnock and Ossoff won in Georgia. She's there with her legislative aide. She only has one of her staff members, I guess, in there with her, as she describes. And she's scrolling through lunch options to get them something nice. And that's when she hears this bang on the door as she says, boom, boom, boom. So let's see how she describes the events as they unfold next.
And so basically, I go into the back, and there's a bathroom, and then there's a closet. And I jump into the bathroom, and I immediately realize that I shouldn't have gone into the bathroom. I should have jumped in the closet. And so I open the door when all of a sudden I hear that whoever was trying to get inside got into my office. And then I realized that it's too late. That it's too late for me to get into the closet. And so I tried to I go back in and I hide back in the bathroom behind the door. And then I just start to hear these yells of, "Where is she? Where is she?" And I just thought to myself, they got inside. And so I hide behind my door like this, like I'm here, and the bathroom door starts going like this, like the bathroom door is behind me, or rather in front of me, and I'm like this, and the door hinges right here, and I just hear, "Where is she? Where is she?" And this was the moment where I thought everything was over.
So that sounds quite frightening. In fact, this was the clip that was making the rounds around Twitter. A lot of her supporters were posting this clip saying, "Oh my God, this is so scary. The rioters got into AOC's office and she was hiding. She just got away within an inch of her life. Oh my God." And then you keep watching the video and you find out that this was not a rioter. This was not some unhinged individual that got into her office to kill her. Let's continue to watch and see what happens.
I have never been quieter in my entire life. I was just, I don't even know if I held my breath, but I was just, here behind there, and I just start sliding down. And then all of a sudden I hear my staffer G yell out. And he's like, hey, it's okay. Come out. So I'm like, I don't know, so deeply rattled. I'm still processing the end of my life when I come out. And I come out, and this man is a Capitol police officer.
Oh, it was a police officer. Okay, so you should feel safe now. You should feel totally fine. You made these ridiculous assumptions that you've been making this entire week, and you've probably made a lot of your life, to be honest. Like, assuming people are going to jump you in a grocery store doesn't happen. Nobody touches you. You don't get assaulted. And then you hear the banging on your door, and then turns out to be a police officer. You made a big deal out of nothing. So you should feel safe now, right? Wrong.
But the story doesn't end. It's a Capitol Police officer. There was no partner, was not yelling, Capitol Police, etc., etc. But then it didn't feel right. Because he was looking at me with a tremendous amount of anger and hostility. And things weren't adding up. Like, there was no partner there. And no one was yelling. He wasn't yelling like, this is Capitol Police, this is Capitol Police.
So get this. Her justification for why things didn't feel right. And you've probably noticed the theme here. A lot of this is about feelings. It's not about the facts, as Ben Shapiro says, facts don't care about your feelings, folks. But she's like, it didn't feel right because there wasn't a partner there. He wasn't yelling, Capitol Police, Capitol Police. I don't know where she gets these ideas about what proper police protocol is, but police don't always travel with partners. In fact, I think most of the time they don't travel with partners. And they don't just go around yelling, Capitol Police, when they come into contact with people.
Freeze! Vegan police! Vegan police!
And he's looking at you with anger and hostility in his eyes. I mean, again, these are subjective judgments. We weren't there. But, you would think if there's an emergency situation that calls for an evacuation of members of Congress and there's a riot where people are, storming the Capitol proper. We'll get into that in just a bit because, maybe you've made some assumptions about where AOC was located during all of this, and maybe she wasn't clear about that, but we'll get into that. And yeah, maybe an officer would be pretty pissed when he's probably been hearing about his colleagues being assaulted during a storming of the Capitol, during an extremely volatile situation where he's trying to gain control and keep members of Congress safe. So it's just, imagine being that officer who comes to the aid of a member of Congress and then being described in this way that he's looking at her with, hostility and things like that. And it's going to get much worse towards the end of the video when she goes back and talks about this officer. So stay tuned for that. Let's continue.
At first, in my brain and in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I just came from this super intense experience just now. Maybe I'm reading into this, right? Like maybe I'm projecting, like something onto him that like maybe I'm just seeing anger, but maybe he's not trying to be angry. But I talked to G, my legislative director, after the fact, and he said, no, I didn't know if he was there to help us or hurt us either. And G was actually like, this man came with so much hostility that G was sizing him up and didn't know if he was going to have to fight him. Like that is how like aggressive the situation was in that moment. And we couldn't even tell, we couldn't read if like this was a good situation or a bad situation. It was so like, like so many other communities in this country, like just that presence doesn't necessarily give you a clear signal if you're safe or not. And so the situation did not feel okay. And then he just looks at me and yells at me and he just go down and then go to this other building. I'm not gonna like name the specific building, but he basically says, go down and go to this building. But he just says the name of the building, doesn't say anything else. But we're so rattled in that moment. And the situation felt so volatile with this officer that I run over, I grab my bag, and we just start running over to that building. Now, mind you, we weren't escorted. He didn't like come with us or follow us or anything like that.
Okay, so then she says this situation was volatile. First of all, she's talking about her aide looking at the guy as if he might have to fight him. Insane. But then the guy tells them to go to this other building, and she's like, well, the situation was so volatile with this officer, you know, I didn't want to be around him, so I just grabbed my stuff and ran. And then she's complaining about not being escorted by the police or being followed by that police officer she was trying to get away with. How does any of this make sense? You just complained about being scared of this officer and wanting to get away from him, and then because you're running away, I mean, they didn't have time to call, let's get an escort for Representative AOC. We need to take her to this building. You just ran away. What were you expecting? You started running. It's incredible. It's incredible.
And anyway, so we start running down this spiral staircase to the first floor. And we get to the first floor, and we hear the yells getting louder and louder, like, rah, 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 you know, just like I hear like the hinges cracking, you know, it just feels like you can hear all of this yelling and screaming. And as we're going down this spiral staircase closer to the street level, like the yells only get louder and louder and louder that you hear.
So at this point, she already got to the other building that she was instructed to go to by the officer. And she goes up to the 5th floor, I guess was knocking on some office. Nobody was there. So she goes down this staircase to the 1st floor, which is street level. And she claims she hears all this yelling. Like, rah, rah, rah. She does that sound. She says it feels like you can hear the hinges cracking or something to that effect. Feels like you can hear. That's an interesting way to describe something, but the hinges cracking, you know. Now, again, if this was the main building, the Capitol building, and if this was during the time of the building being stormed, this sounds like it would make sense. This sounds like it could actually be plausible. And a lot of people who were watching this initially probably had this idea that she was in the Capitol building, which was stormed, and probably made it out just barely before losing her life. We'll get into that in just a second, so pay attention to what she says next.
So I realized that I had actually passed by Katie Porter's office, and all of this stuff was happening so quickly that I saw Katie Porter like going into her office, just like holding a cup of coffee because all of these developments were happening so rapidly that I think some people were at different awareness levels and at different like urgency levels than others.
So she remembers that she passed Katie Porter's office, and then she sees her, and she sees Representative Porter walking cool as a cucumber, just la-di-da-di-da with a cup of coffee. Apparently this is an extremely volatile situation where people think they're about to just lose their life immediately, like they're about to die. And Katie Porter's just like, oh, just another day at the office, getting my coffee, walking down. She knows what's going on. I mean, this is not, you know, Katie Porter wasn't ignorant to what was going on outside the walls. She knew. So AOC is freaking out. Katie Porter, nice and calm. Doesn't that tell you that maybe one person in this situation is reacting rationally and the other is maybe delusional or exaggerating? So let's backtrack a bit. We started at AOC's office. We ended up in Katie Porter's office, and she's claiming she's hearing all these sounds and all these things, and she's, you know, fearing for her life. For those of you who don't know the layout of how the Capitol complex works, the main Capitol building, the one with the dome as she describes it, that is where the breach happened. That's where the crowd was. That's where they were going into. They are not in the Capitol building, the main Capitol building. They are in these buildings that are quite far away. Here, I'll show you guys a map. You can see Porter's office and you can see AOC's office. Very far away from the crowd and where they were when they were storming the Capitol. In fact, to give you a sense of how things were inside the building that AOC was in with Representative Porter, let's play a video of how things looked like on the inside at the time.
Right. You forgot about social distancing.
clearly a life-threatening situation.
I'm at like a 10, right? Like I am at a full 10, fight or flight, thought I was going to die like 10 minutes ago, then thought I was going to die again, because I have to tell you that when I was banging on this door, I had thought, fully expected that by this point the building had been breached and there were people walking the hallways. Like this was what I had fully expected to be having been gone on in that moment. And so when we're outside in this hallway alone, I'm banging on this door and I'm thinking, and I'm fully expecting one of these insurrectionists to turn the corner with a gun and that it would be over again.
So she thought and fully expected that the doors were breached and that there were already people inside this building while she was banging on this door. Based on what? Your guess is as good as mine. Based on nothing, I would imagine. There's no indication that someone breached that building. So she's just making up things in her head again, just like she was at the grocery store and other times, throughout the previous days. So are we supposed to take this seriously?
And like all these crazy thoughts go through your mind, and even like just racially, even Katie and I were having these conversations, and it's like it like where you feel like we as members, our nameplates are next to our offices, and it's like, are some offices safer than others because they have white sounding names or because they have male sounding names, or like who would be safer to hide in because you would expect them least in that office, like all these crazy things that you're thinking.
Well, she got one thing correct. Those are definitely crazy things to be thinking because it's totally detached from reality. Probably the most hated person in the building at the time was probably Mike Pence, because they felt that this was someone who was supposed to be Trump's right-hand man and that he now had betrayed Donald Trump, so he was evil incarnate to them. White male, by the way. I don't think they were necessarily targeting people based on gender and race. This is absolute insanity. This idea that you had all these people storming the Capitol like, we're gonna get the women of color, we're gonna come after you, and we're like, let's look at this nameplate, is that a woman of color? We're gonna get her. This is absolutely insane. In fact, this idea that there was a huge amount of white supremacists who were violent and they would just assault any person of color they came across, you might have noticed there might have been someone there, or a few people there who were people of color. Maybe let's put a picture up there. I didn't feel too unsafe. I have to say, I didn't feel it's not like I'm a well-known person. I probably came across 2 people there who knew who I was. Everybody else, no clue. So how was it that I felt totally fine as a person of color, minority, among these alleged crazy amounts of violent white supremacists? This is crazy talk.
When they were evacuating our building earlier that day, we were supposed to take our emergency hoods with us. It's a long story. Point is that there are emergency supplies. We were supposed to take our emergency supplies with us, and that Capitol police officer didn't tell us anything about that. He didn't tell us bring your hoods. He didn't tell us do this. He didn't tell us do that. And what's really weird in the aftermath of that situation is that after you see the videos, after you hear about what happened with Capitol Police leadership, after you know that leadership knew about the threats of violence and didn't prepare adequately for it, you start thinking back at all of these things. And I think about that officer and just the uncertainty. Did he not say that he was Capitol Police on purpose? Did he lose himself in that moment? Did he not give us the extraction point location because he forgot? Or was he trying to actually put us in a vulnerable, situation? Just the very uncertainty that you don't know if that person was actually trying to protect you or not is already deeply unsettling. And, you know, I'm not here to say I'm not here to pass judgment on any one individual or on any one officer or this, that, and the other.
Yeah, it's very unsettling that you would go out and make these insane insinuations that a Capitol Hill police officer was potentially misleading you and trying to put you in harm's way, that he wasn't actually there to protect you, that he actually had these nefarious intentions based on nothing, based on your feelings, based on your insane delusions. I mean, that's pretty disgusting. I mean, oh my God. And then she does actually probably I think she realizes maybe a few seconds after she says all this, that this is unhinged lunatic stuff that she's saying. So she decides to go, and, I don't want to, I don't want to pass judgment on any individual officer or anything like that. And, Fox News likes to take me out of context when I say things sometimes. Like, she understands what she just said was probably kind of crazy. So she tries to backtrack a little bit. But to even suggest that is just so insane. And wow. I'm lost for words, to be honest. Now, of course, after this video came out, people rightfully started criticizing AOC, basically saying she was exaggerating and kind of being delusional, like we talked about here in this video, and that she wasn't actually in the building that was stormed by the rioters. She was way off to the side in buildings that were not actually breached or affected. And she did not like this criticism. She was saying it was disinformation and wrong, etc. A lot of her supporters, you should have seen the comments on that, the actual live stream that she did on Instagram. People were saying crazy things like the cops were in on it, they were participating, and they were, going full on, tinfoil hat conspiracy theory mode. So AOC actually put out this email to her supporters, and it's pretty crazy. Let's take a look. So the email is titled Fighting Disinformation, and it says, as we speak, right-wing operatives with millions of followers on social media are spreading flat-out lies and misleading information about Alexandria. But with your help, we can force Twitter and Facebook to take action and enforce their own rules. What's so frustrating about these attacks is that once the truth comes out, so few people get to hear it. Hundreds of thousands or potentially millions of people will have already seen or shared the misleading tweets or fake news articles. And then in bold lettering, we need your help. And then the name of the person the email was sent out to. Here's what you can do to help us combat this campaign of disinformation and others in the future. 1, scan your social media to find posts with this misleading information, especially those using the trending hashtag. The email doesn't mention the hashtag, but the hashtag was hashtag Alexandria Ocasio-Smollett, basically saying she's like Jussie Smollett. Don't tweet any hashtags yourself because we don't want to spread them further. 2, identify any posts that are threatening or harassing and use the built-in report features to flag them for moderators. Facebook and Twitter both have built-in tools for reporting posts and tweets that break the rules. So a sitting member of Congress is calling on her supporters. This is not a fundraising email. This isn't going out trying to, garner up support for her next run or trying to inform them of actual information. It's a call to action to censor her political opponents who are spreading a message that she doesn't like, which goes completely against the spirit of the First Amendment. Members of Congress are not even really allowed to block people on social media. We have court rulings on this case, but actually trying to get her followers to censor or trying to get them to censor via social media companies, are there potential legal issues with that? I'm not a lawyer. I don't know, but it seems wrong. And at first, I tweeted this out, and after I tweeted it out, I looked at it and I thought, no, maybe this is fake. So I took down the tweet and I was like, you know what? I'm not going to post this until I can verify this. Like my gut feeling is telling me this has to be fake, right? So I look into it more and more and I find out it's actually real. It's actually real. This was an email that she sent out to encourage her followers to censor posts, flag posts that portray her negatively. And spread disinformation, even though it's just, she was really the one spreading the disinformation with her Instagram Live. Anyways, guys, that's the end of the video. What do you think? Do you think AOC was right? Are her feelings valid? Or was she delusional, crazy, whatever? What are your thoughts? Leave it down in the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Social media links are in the description box below, as well as merch. Support us at nuancebro.com/join, and I'll see you next time, bro.